I'm going to use a plastic. I'm going to show you a trick with this plastic real quick. This is the bag the clay came in, but you can use any kind of bag, any kind of cellophane. Different thicknesses give different results. Here is a tool mark where I'm just putting a line in it. It's got a very sharp edge, and to feather that out by hand would take a bit of work. If I lay the plastic over it and then run the tool down it, it's a nice feathered edge, much more like a natural wrinkle. I'm going to use that to my advantage in shaping this brain a little bit. I'm going to use it to feather itself out. But I still want that nice pronounced bit between those two hemispheres. Nice and smooth. And that's a little more pronounced hemisphere-wise, which I want. But it looks like there's still more squiggles inside of those lines, which is also what I want. And I'd mentioned calming these down a bit. I want a good wet brush for this. Really wet and no dried clay. And I'm just going to paint over it, and that wetness is going to make some kind of clay sluice type stuff that is going to fill in these cracks and gaps, and I can really get the texture that I want out of this brain. When I use this sucker. See how this is more natural now and gentle, whereas this is pretty harsh and it's a lot of little ropes, and this kind of melds more into brain shape. I'm going to go ahead and just spray the sculpt here because we want it to stay wet. It's water-based clay. And I'm watering it a little more than I need to because I happen to like my clay a little wetter than most people. That is an individual call. You might not be the same. I'm going to wet my hands up good. I'm going to pack this just a little bit tighter. This is getting to be pretty brainy. Taking my puddle of water here that I've been spraying, I'm just going to rub some clay in it to break down this clay, and that's going to make the water thicker, and I'm going to use that water to fill in those gaps. This will show you the brain I'm working on there. It's a nice 2 hemispheres. This side's been blended in quite a bit. This side is still pretty raw, and I'm starting to blend in the back. Putting water right on it. Using this thick water here that I made. Using it to fill in some of those gaps so it's not as harsh. There's some real big areas. I'll just pinch off a bit of clay and push that clay into there. pretty happy with how the brain is going now. Looking good. Like, I know it's a brain. Again, I'm just filling in these holes. And that clay is going to make that look a little more seamless and a little more like anatomy. And in water-based clay, you can really use this wet clay to smooth out the rough stuff. Whereas in oil-based, you gotta spray stuff on it, like alcohol. It's more of a pain to me. I would much rather use water-based clay. See, now I'm kind of getting a good texture from that water pulling up and the brush leaving its imprint on it. And this is kind of the finishing of a sculpt, and it's the most tedious part, and sculptors who are way better than me take a lot more time on it than I do. I really don't spend any more than 8 or 10 hours sculpting anything. And if I put an hour into a body organ, it's pretty impressive, because I normally don't. I want to look at this bottom area here now, because that's a different part of the brain, and I got to make it real quick, because I want that difference to be noticed. I'm just basic shaping it here in my hands, and then I'm pushing it into place. This is the part of the brain where your spinal cord comes out of. There we go. I've got a tool here, which is a bit of a plastic comb. I've broken parts off of both sides, and I've taped it to a pin. And this is a really good tool for doing kind of fake hair, muscle striations. And I'm just using it to texture this bit of brain differently. And I don't know if this is the cerebellum or the medulla oblongata in a haunted house. It doesn't matter too much. So that's a different bit of texture. I'm using a drier brush. It's not dry, but it's drier. So I really want to knock that down. I want most of that I just did to go away. So I'm just left with a few of those lines, and you can tell where some are smoothed out. And then I'll stipple on top of that. That's a brain. Calling it done. And it is about to be molded.